and welcome, everyone. I'm Ryan Heckman, the CEO of Rallyday Partners, and this is the Founder's Journey podcast. We'll explore the heart and soul of great founders and their journey to build the company of their dreams. You will learn about new industries and business models while discovering how to apply the founder's mindset to your everyday work and life. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Founder's Journey podcast. I'm Ryan Heckman, your host. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing you to Denise Logan. Hi, Denise.
Hi, Ryan. So good to be with you.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. So kind of small world serendipity stuff, folks. Denise reached out via email and said, boy, you have a podcast called The Founder's Journey. I wrote a book called The Seller's Journey, and I help sellers with their peace of mind and well-being during a transaction and prevent, dead deals and prevent brain damage and prevent ill feelings for all the parties in a transaction. And I was thinking to myself when I saw this email, I've just never heard of such a thing. Denise's book, The Seller's Journey, you can find it on Amazon. I can't say with a straight face I read all of it, Denise, but I did read enough of it. And the one thing that I love about how it is talked about out there is it's the alchemist fable for founders who are going to transact with their business, which is oftentimes their baby. And I'm just fascinated by your line of work. I can imagine at least a dozen instances where I sure wish you were part of our world and the world of the folks that we transacted with. It happens more than we think in terms of how challenging these things are. And so for the founders out there, for people in the advisory community, whether they be attorneys or investment bankers, this is going to be a great episode for you. And I'm excited to share Denise's wisdom. Why don't we start, Denise, with your own personal journey, if you don't mind, and how and why did you decide to become the seller whisperer or the founder's whisperer, or however we should characterize it?
Yeah. Early life, I was a therapist, and then I became a lawyer. And right now we should be asking why I didn't use that good therapy skill to keep myself from becoming a lawyer. That probably would have been a good use of that. I practiced law in Washington, D.C., built a law firm. When we reached 50 lawyers and 300 support staff, I exited my practice, got rid of my house and bought a motorhome. And that could be a whole other conversation over a beverage. I thought I would travel for 6 months. It turned into 5 years, where I traveled all over North and Central America. And when I came off the road, I joined a friend's business who was preparing for sale. And over the next 10 years, we took that business to the market 3 times. And each time he got right to the door and would pull out because he just couldn't see his life on the other side. So I left and did a research study to try to figure out, why do business owners get stuck? Why are they like me? I waited so long, I would have given my business away to be free of it. Or why are they like him, where they go too early and can't pull the trigger? So for the last 15 years, I've walked side by side with owners and their advisors to navigate the emotional arc of letting go of your business.
And maybe embrace something new and better, I guess, is hope, I suppose. Well, if it's okay, I mean, it's just a fascinating story on its own. I'm dying to know a few things, if it's okay.
Yes.
So, graduated from school and said, I want to be a therapist? Or was that something that you intended to do after or during college? Or did that happen to you? What was that like?
Yeah, like so many of us, we find ourselves in something. So I grew up in a small town in Ontario, Canada. And when I was getting ready to go to college, I wanted to go to law school. And the guidance counselor, who we can agree now should not have been guiding young women, said, you don't want to be a lawyer. If you're a lawyer, you will never meet a man and you will end up all alone and die as a spinster.
Oh, God, that's great.
And I remember thinking, I was 16 years old. I was like, well, Mr. Erfurt, I don't want that. That sounds like a horrible life. He said, honey, what you need to do is get a degree that you can use so that if your husband dies or leaves you with a bunch of kids, you can support them. And so, yes, we can all agree that that was probably not.
Mr. Hertford, I would say he's probably rolling over in his grave at this point, in any event. That's crazy.
So I became a therapist, and I have a specialty track in I'm trained in two specialties. One is work and financial disorders. So people who are addicted to work and money. And oh boy, we never see any of that in the business community, right?
Especially in the private equity community, I would say, even more
Right.
damning. Yeah.
And the other track is called thanatology, which is the study of death and dying. And honestly, Ryan, I don't think at the time I could have told you why I needed both of those tracks, but it's quite clear to me from this part of my life that when a business owner is exiting their business, it feels like a death. It is an existential moment when they are ending something and their identity and so much that is wrapped around it. And so, what I often see is as owners get close to the end, existential mortality questions start coming up. Have I done something good with my life? Who will I be on the other side of this? Will I be remembered? And as a culture, we don't deal with endings. And so often what happens is as an owner starts getting close to that point, they turn right around and move back toward a work or financial addiction. They're like, you know what? I just need another turn of equity, or I need to close this next deal, or. So often from this place in my world, I am helping them navigate between those two extremes. But honestly, I became a therapist because I was misdirected. And obviously, eventually, I did get on my way and become a lawyer. And probably Mr. Erfurt, he wasn't right for the reasons he thought, but it was time for me to make a change.
Yeah, he was right for all the wrong reasons, as it turns out. Okay, I mean, this is fascinating. So, like, how many years did you practice in therapy?
Yeah, for 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
And
Although it continues endlessly,
well,
right?
right, exactly. Once a therapist, always a therapist, and we all consume it at times too, for that matter. Okay, so you did that for 2 years, and then, I mean, the law firm that you built, did you start that from 0, or did
I did.
you
I
started
did.
from 0?
From 0.
And what year was that?
Late 88, early 89.
Okay, so after your therapy career, you went to law school, I take
I
it.
went to law school. Yeah.
Where did you do that?
I went to a small school in California called Southwestern
Okay,
and chose it because I had a scholarship and I was like, "I love you. You're the best school I've ever wanted to go to." And they
California doesn't
also
suck either.
yeah, they also had a program that was 2 years. So instead of a traditional 3-year plan, and the way they structured that particular program, if you wanna go down that rat hole, I can totally take us down there, but it was all about the practical application of law instead of just the theoretical part. So one of the things they would do is, like, in the mornings, small small class, like, I think we started with 40 and graduated 25 in that graduating class. In the mornings, we would have what I call regular school, where we would study, and then we'd have a lunch break. When we come back in the afternoon, they would have hired UCLA acting students to be our clients. So they would come in and give us the problems the way clients actually give problems, which are all blah, blah, blah. Then we'd take a dinner break. We would come back in the evening and litigate against each other, go home and study and start it all over again.
That is awesome.
And then periodically, they would break up our law firms, our fake law firms, right? And we would have to deal with things like conflict of interest and what happens when your client is now a client of an opponent. Yeah. So it probably prepared me differently, although I did work for a law firm before I started my own.
Okay. So you hang up your shingle in DC and your attorney won,
Right.
and you ended up with 50 attorneys. How long did you build your practice?
For 9 years,
9 years.
almost 10. Yeah.
And were you ultimately a seller then in that respect? Did you sell the law firm, or how'd that work?
Yeah. I merged with, so at the time, law firms weren't really sellable, right? I merged with a large Baltimore firm,
Okay.
got rid of my house, and made my exit. Bought
Picked
a
up
motor home and took off. Yeah. And in many ways, I think sometimes the founders who are listening can relate. I probably knew I wanted to leave several years before I made that exit. And it's a curious thing that in many industries, we're pushed towards scale, scale, scale. You must get bigger. You must. Honestly, I think I was happiest with me and one paralegal and a legal secretary in 400 square feet of office space. But that urge to grow and the impetus to keep doing it pushed me in a direction that probably was not actually ideal for my personality.
Interesting. And then was it a situation where the, I guess, endured pain was eventually impossible to continue, or was this more of a Denise got the courage to do something about it? Like what was ultimately the catalyst for making the decision, and did you grind on that decision for a long time, or was it sudden?
Oh, so it looked sudden and I ground on it for a long time. Like both things are true. Internally, I knew I wanted to leave. I had brought in some external consultants, and their answer was, you know what, if you just double down for 10 more years, you will get so much bigger. And did that for a while. And then what I realized, wow, we're about to go real serious. I had been driving to work trying to figure out what angle to hit the embankment to flip my car.
Come on.
Not to kill myself, but that I'll bet if I cause a big enough disaster, then people will understand why I want out. And so obviously my good training as a therapist kicked in. I did not flip my car. And I said to myself, well, there's another option. Right? You don't have to have disaster. I say it a lot of times to clients. You know, you get what is like a little pebble falling on your head, and that's a sign. And you can pay attention to the pebbles that are falling on your head and change course. Or then you get a rock or a boulder or a safe. And I
Mm,
realized that I had been trying to ignore the pebbles, and it had started moving toward boulders and safes.
mhm.
So I made that decision. Let's go super serious. So I made a super ugly, choppy exit from my business. I would never tell any client to do what I'm about to do. So I always say, kids, pay attention and don't do this. Because I decided I'm ready to go and I don't want to wait. I called my 3 biggest competitors and said, I'm talking to all 3 of you. Whoever will step forth and make sure that all of my clients that want to go with you are safe, and you will let go of the ones who don't want to go. And all of my employees who want to go with you are safe, and the ones who don't want to go with you can leave, and is willing to close in 30 days is the winner. That is such a screwed up exit. I will just tell you. But it did exactly what I needed, which was to allow myself to make a departure and to make sure that all the people that I cared about were safe. And it probably comes back to an internal belief of mine. It's only money. I can make more money. What I left with was the most valuable asset, which was me. And I did not know what I would do when I took off in my motorhome. And after I exited my business, I remember sitting on the patio, so relieved. Like,
Wait,
oh my,
wait, just to create the context of the story. Where did you take your RV? Like, where did you go?
oh gosh, I went so many places. But this is actually before I took off in
Oh,
the
this is on the
RV.
patio of your home.
Yeah, the
Okay. All
patio
right.
of my
Sorry, sorry,
home.
sorry, sorry. Got it.
Sitting on the patio, relieved to be done. And I remember thinking, oh, I got what I wanted. Oh no, I got what I wanted.
Mm.
Was that what I wanted? Did I get what I wanted? And I hear that a lot with owners on the other side of their exit. They are relieved and sometimes wondering. And what I would say is both in my life and in the life I see with a lot of clients, the people around us often don't understand when we have made that exit. They think, but you got a big stack of cash, or you wanted that. I thought you were sick of your employees. And it's both and. We do want that change, whether it's I'll say a healthy exit or an unhealthy exit. We do want the change, and the change is dramatic for us, and it takes time to adapt to that. I often use a metaphor like when our children launch. Yes, we know our job is to keep them alive and healthy and train them well so they can launch. And yet, when they do, when you drop your child off at college and you come home and you're setting the table and you have 3 plates instead of 2, it hits. And you're like, oh, I wish they were here making all that noise and leaving their shoes in the hallway and leaving the lights on. And I'm glad they have gone. And I think that is a piece that I often have with owners where, yes, we do want to sell, we do want to exit, and I miss it. And being able to have a safe space where that is true, whether they are continuing on for a period of time, like either in an earn-out or a transition period, or in the absolute exit. Often, the people around them do not understand. And getting a big sack of cash does not make all of that go away.
Yeah, I totally get this. And I mean, first of all, that whole story is awesome. And it gives so much space when you tell that story to a founder to be as crazy as they want to be, given your own personal story. It just creates this great opportunity for them to open up. You're someone that they even their craziest stuff, they know it's probably going to be okay with no judgment from you. And that's awesome. And I also find it so interesting, just like you said, like all of us, I'm a former founder. I'm a current founder, I suppose, in many ways of Rallyday. I have friends that just have like jobs, like they're my buddies, and they're not all CEOs and founders. And then I have my parents and my wife and kids, and like my brothers, for example, who I'm very close to, and none of the problems that I actually have at my job are socially okay to talk about because they're just so ridiculous. I mean, and by
Ooh,
ridiculous,
you made too much money,
eh,
right? I'm
yeah,
too busy.
you almost like hear yourself talk and you're like, God, you sound like such a jerk. And so there's the receiving end. And then inevitably, like my mom is a perfect example. She was a third grade teacher for like 35 years. She cannot help but to try to help me. So if she hears me say anything that I'm doing that, she's like, well, have you thought about, and it's something just absolutely crazy. So as a founder, not only can you not share because it's socially awkward, but without the context or having been in those shoes, the advice that you get from people is just misguided, misinformed, and basically irrelevant. And so you end up just reclusing, like being recluse. You just stop sharing
The
with
problems
anybody
don't go away, they just go underground.
underground.
And one of the things that I see a lot is that a business owner, they are used to being the person who knows everything about their business and their industry. And when they're going through this process of selling their business, they are going to get asked questions in the process that they don't know the answers to. And they're worried about looking dumb, right? We think about the due diligence process. Oh my gosh, are you going to find something that I did wrong? Are you going to find something that makes me look dumb? And they will close up. And so a lot of the work that I'm doing when I'm involved in a process is also helping the professionals to come back to just the humanity of it. That person isn't acting sketch. What's really happening is they are anxious. They are nervous. And whenever we're nervous, so can we talk a little brain science? Does that work?
I would love to. And while you're doing that, it reminds me of this principle that I have where if you're kind of shy and you're really successful and doing great in the world, you can appear arrogant. And if you're not and you're shy, you're just shy. And similar here, like a seller might feel like one of us when we were about to take an exam in college and we're just nervous as hell that we're going to do bad and we've got a little bit of stage fright or whatever that is. But to a to everyone around a successful alpha founder, to your point, that behavior gets misinterpreted as something that is actually very normal that happens to all of us. So
Right.
I love this whole humanity thread you're pulling on. So let's go down that road. Tell us more about that.
Also, they don't want to look dumb in front of their banker or their
Mhm.
buyer or their wealth manager or their CPA. So a lot of times that role that I'm filling is all of the uncertainty, and I'll call it crazy in quotes, can come to me and we can unpack it. Things like, I don't know, I don't have any friends outside of my business. And that happens a lot for founders, that their employees or their customers or even their competitors are their friends, and they have not invested in that other part of their life. And it comes up. They don't want to say that to you or to their banker because they're like, well, that seems kind of lame, and I don't want people to know I don't have friends. Or we'll just use the metaphor again of when our children leave home. We know what that's called, empty nest. And even though there's a lot of laughter in our industry that the business owner treats it like it's their baby, heck yeah, they do. Guess what? They birthed it, they raised it up, they stayed up all night with it, and now it's time to let go. And in some instances, the business is their favorite child. And P.S., their real children sometimes know that too. And the business has been giving them things like an excuse. It's way easier to say to your wife, I would love to go on that cruise with you, but I just can't because the business, blah, blah, blah. It's way easier to say that than, I don't think I can stand more than 3 consecutive hours of your yapping. And you would perhaps not be surprised how often I hear from owners, I don't know if I want to do anything with my wife or my husband. I I don't even know them, and I'm worried about that becoming apparent. So I become the place where those things, we can deal with them. So coming back to just a little of the brain science. In our brain, right, we have I'll call two primary parts. There is the amygdala, which is the fear sensor in our brain. They call it the lizard brain. It's the oldest part of our brain, and it is designed to keep us safe. Its job is to scan the environment all the time, looking for danger. Unfortunately, it's a little bit dumb, and it can't tell the difference between real danger and perceived danger. The other part of our brain is called the prefrontal cortex. I mean, there are lots of other parts of our brain, but these are the two that apply. And the prefrontal cortex is where we make logical thinking decisions. So often in a transaction, an owner will seem emotional. Heck yeah, they for sure are. So I know you and I can see each other while we're recording, but I want to talk this through so as the audience can hear it. So just take your hand. I'm going to use your hand like a handy dandy brain tool. The thumb is the amygdala. So it's like the little lizard scanning the environment. If when you were a child, you were attacked by a black bear, your amygdala would spot a big black dog and think it's a bear and signal you to run. Super helpful, but a little bit like off track. So take your thumb and wrap it across your palm and bring your fingers over the top. We've created, one of my clients calls this a girly fist because men know not to have their thumb inside their fist. But what we have done is safely tuck the amygdala inside our brain, and the fingers over the front are the prefrontal cortex. That's the thinking part of our brain. So move your thumb around inside that little girly fist. What do you notice, Ryan?
It's hard to move it.
It's hard to move it. And if you move your thumb more aggressively, what you notice is that the fingers are less tight. So what we're doing is when the amygdala is getting more and more activated, the prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain, isn't on as tight. And if the amygdala gets activated enough, you will flip your lid. Literally, you pop your prefrontal cortex so it can't think. And we see that happen all day long for all of us. All day long, each of us is walking around from fully tucked in to fully wigged out. For a business owner, it feels like an existential threat when they are going to be asked questions that they don't know the answer to. If I look dumb, am I at risk? So we have our clients basically sometimes fully tucked in, sometimes fully wigged out. And our job, I think, as the professionals in a transaction is to pay attention to that and to slow the process down a little bit, to let someone's emotion catch up to them. And usually I hear in the industry, time kills all deals. And what I actually think kills deals is unprocessed emotion. Sometimes we can slow it down by a half an hour or 2 days. I'm not saying stall a deal for 5 months, right? That is something else that's happening in a transaction. But it's about letting this person re-regulate. And you're a good dad. You already know this. When your kids were little, okay, I'll make this even funnier. We've all been to the grocery store, and there is a mom and a toddler, and the toddler is throwing a dang fit and on the floor, kicking and screaming. Do we all know how that's going to play out? Who wins? The toddler wins, for sure. But if the mom is able to calm herself enough and bring the child to her, the child will re-regulate and calm itself down. And then you can have a rational, not rational, still a toddler, but a more helpful conversation. A lot of times in the process, the professionals are also wigged out. And so when an owner starts acting squirrely, the investment banker gets scared. Uh-oh, there goes my commission. And you can almost see their amygdala flipping out. And so often I will say to a banker, you know what? Don't shove your client, shove me. Shove me till you get re-regulated and you can have a deeper conversation.
Yeah, two amygdalas don't make a right.
No, that's right. It's all lizard all the time is what I call it when we're in that.
I mean, I see that, and part of that, and sorry if I just interrupted
No,
you, but you bring up the banker precisely when I was thinking about good bankers that I've worked with over the years and their ability and interest in checking in and having the skill to have those kinds of conversations proactively as opposed to in a reactionary mode. And I can imagine them reading your book and this being an awakening for them that obviously part of their job is to just get the thing done and as quickly as possible at the price that everyone wanted. But I would also just say like the stereotype that I have in my head of the typical banker is not someone who is really all that interested in, call it the softer side of all this stuff. And so they don't have the interest nor the skills, I guess you could say. But perhaps this education that you're providing us now, I mean, you probably have a pretty good sense of this. What percentage of deals has a founder who using your metaphor of the hand flips out so much that it damages the process? I mean, what's your estimate?
I don't know. But what I will tell you is that the mythology in the industry is that owners are unreliable and unpredictable. And therefore, if the deal gets too hard, we just flush the deal. We're just like, forget it, move on to something else. And I think in the industry, there is this illusion that it's a numbers game. We just need to see enough deals because if we see enough deals, the right ones will happen. And I don't actually think that's the case. I think almost every deal can be done if people are willing to slow down enough and pay attention to what's really happening. I mean, here's an example. I was talking to a banker about a deal that came apart, and the company had been owned by father and son, and the son was leading the process. And they had asked before they took on the engagement, is your dad good with this? Yeah, my dad's good. Don't worry, you don't need to talk to him. And then, big fat surprise, right before the closing, dad is not okay with this. And the deal unraveled. And the bank was like, oh, this was so unpredictable. I was like, no, actually, that's not unpredictable. If you were talking to the son and he said, don't worry, our financials are good, would you have just taken the business to the market and never done any due diligence on financials? No, that's because you aren't familiar with how to do that. So when you hear an owner say, don't worry, my co-founder is good, or don't worry, I have a plan. Golf, travel, and grandkids when I sell the business. And P.S., that's not a plan. But often the banker is like, check. There, good. You've got a plan. Excellent. Now let's go.
Yeah, and part of that's the incentives of investment banking. I mean, they typically, I mean, there may be a retainer, but they're only going to get paid if the deal gets done. And you're not going to get a deal done unless you try. And if you don't have the awareness or the skills to do the inquiry early, you're going to realize it late. And sometimes a banker, it's better off to just move on too,
For
because
sure.
there's next deal, next opportunity for a fee. And so the industry is kind of structured funny in that regard. I would also say that what you're bringing up as far as the seller just saying like flush the deal, like let's just move on. Interestingly, I would think like if you own a really successful business, the status quo is pretty good. And so, it might even be easier for someone with a very successful business to bail because things are going pretty good. And why rock the boat? Particularly if they're in the middle of a deal and they're worrying about what they're going to be, who they're going to be, what they're going to be doing and with whom, and the answers aren't great. You've got another status quo that is pretty good.
Right.
So I guess you would say in so many words that when you're selling a business, the system is built for failure in many ways, absent your training and your role in the transaction.
And the truth is that every owner will leave their business one day, voluntarily or involuntarily. We are all going to leave our work. When I meet owners who say to me, well, if I leave my company, I'm always like, oh, friend, that word is when. It is when. And do you want that to be by your choice? Or do you want that to happen to you or to your spouse when you quote? I wrote a column a while ago called, Is Dying at Your Desk Noble or Tragic? You might guess how I come down on that.
I'm hoping you said tragic.
Tragic, for sure. It is not noble. And yet we hear owners say, right, oh, I'll just die at my desk and leave it for my spouse to pick up. There are advisors around them. You and I know that businesses that transition after the death of a leader trade for much lower multiples. Their staff bolt, their competitors scoop them. So it is a tragedy for an owner to not have a plan. I think sometimes also in our world, people get a lot of focus on startups, how to start it up, but we don't talk about how to leave. So I'm going to draw on Stephen Covey's principle. Begin with the end in mind. When you begin a business, how will you leave? When will you leave? How do you know when it's time to leave? And I think a lot of owners think, well, I'll just know. And it isn't always within our control when we leave our businesses.
Well, and it's funny. I mean, NFL oftentimes has great theater and great parallels with things in life. And I'm always kind of saddened when a quarterback who's had like a wonderful career, their last play that they ever get to relive in their minds was a interception or a fumble or just another bad pass, and they get yanked off the field and they don't get to leave on top. I mean, here in Denver, we have Peyton Manning and John Elway both left winning after Super Bowls, but that is the minority of times.
Right.
And I can imagine some advice you give owners to say something like, look, if you plan this out properly, you can leave like this. Or if you let things go for too long, like your pebbles to boulders comment, you lose control of that theater. And
Yeah.
it's sad to watch a great NFL quarterback being benched.
Right.
I also find oftentimes that with sellers, when you really get to it with them, oftentimes what's precipitating the transaction are actually some very personal issues, whether they be in their marriage or
Right.
their children or some other part of their life has deteriorated and become boulders on their head, and they perceive the only way to fix this very important part of their life is to sell the business. And then they wise up and realize, well, wait a second, is that really a reason to sell a business? Is because my marriage sucks?
right? Or my
Or should I
health
be in
is
marriage?
right?
Or
Or my health has failed,
Yep, yep.
right? But we could look, I think, using the NFL metaphor, right? Tom Brady retired, was out only a little bit, and jumped back in. And obviously, it was not because Tom Brady didn't have enough money. Right. Tom Brady had enough until the divorce maybe, but Tom Brady had enough. What brought him back in and what keeps owners in a lot is that they don't know exactly what they're getting from work and where else they're going to get that. So one of the questions I ask owners, I don't ask them, what are you going to do on the other side? Because just like our kids when they're little, they don't know. What are my options? The question I usually ask is, what does work provide for you other than money and financial security? Because we are not selling the business if you're not getting money and financial security. So we can check those boxes. That's going to happen. But then I want them to come up, and I'll work with them through this, but 15 distinct answers other than money and financial security.
Oh, that's so cool you put a minimum on there, and that's a pretty long list.
It's a pretty long list because the first ones that come up are pretty easy. And you think about it, like if you and I just play this game, right? What else do you get from work other than money and financial security, Ryan?
I like being needed in a weird way,
Mhm.
even though I complain about that a lot.
It also gives you something to complain about,
Well, there's my number 2.
right? It is.
My wife would laugh at that. Certainly, accomplishment. It's kinda like playing a sport, at some level. I like the pride of mastery
Mhm.
and kinda feeling like, especially where I am in my career today, like a place where I can express my full self and feel like I'm good at something. So,
Right?
a feeling of mastery. I also like the pursuit of the craft, meaning that I feel like I'm on a steeper learning curve now than maybe when I was even in my 20s.
Mhm.
And that satisfies my curiosity and sense of personal progress. And I may not aspire to die at my desk, but going back to the NFL metaphor, if I could die playing football on the field, I might choose that. And work seems more like that to me than almost anything else in my life. And I dream of maybe picking up stakes, maybe not in an RV. I think I'd rather take a flight to Italy and never come home with my
Yeah.
beautiful wife by my side. But I think if she were on this podcast with us, she would say, yeah, and that would last about a week. And Ryan would grab me and take me back to some other adventure at work. So maybe that fades away as I get older, but I don't think so. These feelings that I have that you have just encouraged me to reveal or share, I feel like they're only growing with age. Because I enjoy what I do more because I'm getting better at it, and like it's just such a playground. We have a sticker at Rally Day that we give to founders, and it says love the work.
Right.
And it's kind of a way of showing up that has a lot of love attached to the work that we get to do. And there's some gratitude embedded in there. So that's my direct, maybe long answer to what may have been a rhetorical question.
No, it
But
wasn't.
but it's all very real.
And you hit a lot of different elements. I mean, I might just toss out some of the ones that I hear, and would they use different language around them, but some of them are that. It's structure to our day, to our week, to our year. It's a place to go, right? During COVID, we were all desperate to get out of our houses, and our spouses were desperate for us to get out of those houses too. They're like, where are you going? It's a place to go. It's also intellectual stimulation. It's the thrill of the chase, the thrill of the hunt, right? It is also a place where our wisdom is valued. Because I don't know about in your house, but in my house, the people do not necessarily think I am very wise. It's also power. At work, I say I want things done, and it usually happens. Again, the people in my house do not necessarily think that because I said something should get done, it should get done. And as we start looking at what those things are, that's what actually we are getting from work. But what we say is, I love my work. And what we love are those things. that we are getting. Those needs were getting met. And getting a big sack of cash does not make those needs go away. So some of what I will do with an owner is help them figure out, who are your Saturday friends? Oh, you don't have any? Well, we need to work on them. And where will you get your sense of power? Because our need for power does not go away. And, going home and telling your wife she hasn't efficiently organized the spice cabinet is not going well for anyone. But that orderliness, those things that we get from work still need to get met in some places. And sometimes those are, I'm going to call them unhealthy because they're not the ones I would choose. But I was working on a transaction very close to the end. Some crazy started spinning up. And I said to the deal team, oh, guess what? This is not from him. This is from home. At work, he's a bully. He's always bullying people. He's always involved in litigation. And Mama just realized the bully's going to be home and she's going to be the target. And what the chaos that was churning up was unconscious on her part, but it was a scrambling away from, oh no, look what's coming. So I got him involved in a boxing program, which of course was for his physical fitness and his social needs, but it also was a place where an important need he was getting met. It wasn't going away, so we could harness it.
Is there any perversity to your work insofar as,
no one has asked me that question in quite that way, so
well,
I'm curious what comes next, Ryan.
I don't mean it like that. It's more like, do you ever start an engagement and some of this content starts to get maybe even for the first time revealed to the seller? And so therefore, do deals sometimes die because you're there? Because they're confronting these things that they get from work that they're in their honest moment says something like, I'm never going to be able to find that out in quote unquote the real world when I don't have my business? Or do you find that talking about them is more often than not healthy, helpful, and results in a better outcome for everybody?
Yeah, generally it does work out that way. I think one of the things that is valuable is to see for an owner, does it make sense for you to continue on in the business after a sale, right? Maybe the buyer might want to have a 2-year transition period or an earnout. I think there's some self-awareness that is not always good for an owner. I don't like to drive the car when my spouse tells me where to turn. I would not be a good founder to stay on with someone else. And rather than doing what, I think often in a transaction, everyone's like, oh, yeah, this will be economically advantageous for you. That's a place where some reality checking about that, like, can you be that person? And if not, do we need to change the way the deal is structured? Or is this not a good deal for you? I'll give you a separate example. I got invited into a process. It was a business broker deal, so smaller than what you and I would normally do. But the broker had brought 3 private equity buyers to the table for this owner, and the owner had turned them all away. So I had one call with her, and I called the broker back and I said, oh, yeah, she's never going to sell. She fancies herself to be a master blackjack player, and you are her mark. You could bring her 10 more buyers. She is not selling ever. So, you could keep chasing this, but this is the time to fold up your tent and go home. So 3 years later, I run into him at a conference and he is still working that deal. And I said to him,
Come on, 3 years?
I said, I will give you 3 free hours of my time to figure out what is wrong with you, because this is no longer about your client. Your client is actually acting directly in accordance with what I told you she was doing. This is about you not being able to let go, not her being unable to let go.
That's fascinating.
He did not take me up on that. And maybe we'll run into him somewhere and he'll
still working that deal.
Yeah,
probably still working that deal. Well, you bring up an interesting point. I was a private equity guy for 15 years before I was a founder and CEO of a multi-site healthcare business that I built. And I ran out of capital and I wanted to do an add-on acquisition. And so, somewhat reluctantly, I got a private equity partner to invest in my business that I had built. And naturally, having done that line of work for 15 years, I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be fine. I know the game and I know the playbook and I know the personalities and I'm gonna be great." And I realized pretty quickly, probably within 6 months, like, I was a pretty good founder and I was a terrible employee. I mean,
Me too. Me
the
too.
worst, the worst. And I still have a relationship with my former owner, and I've never said I'm sorry, but I've wanted
Mm,
to, in terms of not supporting their leadership role as much as I should have as a CEO reporting to a real board and them as fiduciaries. But at the time, I just remember feeling almost adolescent, wanting more authority, and I would do things sometimes subconsciously, I want to believe, to just piss them off, like test my boundaries. If they were listening, Jeff and Bill, I'm sorry, I was not very well behaved, but it all turned out great. And I would also say that going through that experience, we have a lot of conversations with our CEOs about, because they're all mostly founders
right.
who are now like in this more fiduciary role with us as a private equity backed portfolio company. And thankfully, because I went through that experience, I can kind of lament reporting to me, for them and make it kind of funny. I also think it instructed our firm to think about this thing we call push and pull.
Yeah.
And so when you have fiduciary responsibility, and in our case, I kind of describe it as we own the car and somebody's driving that car. It's our CEO. And we're not even in the passenger seat. We're like in the back, or maybe sometimes feel like we're in the trunk.
Right.
Like, where is this person taking us? And I'm very scared. And so we can sometimes backseat drive
Hmm.
as a profession,
Right.
because we have all the responsibility and really no day-to-day
Right.
authority. And that mismatch can be a problem. And predictably, if things are not going great, we can even find ourselves grabbing that wheel. And two people on a drive steering a car is not
No.
good. And so we now have a policy that goes something like, we are in a transaction, we did maybe acquire 70%, say, of the business. But as far as the vision, the execution, like where we're going, we would prefer the founder to retain at least 70% and pull us
Right.
70% of the time and give us an opportunity to push 30%, because naturally we can be helpful, maybe annoying, but helpful, all else being equal. And we find that with our most successful portfolio companies, as we look at it, have accomplished this 70-30 push-pull thing. I don't think we were all that good, to be very honest with you, earlier in Rallyday's history on this one. And we're trying really hard. And I think it really does help ensure that, you've got kind of seller's remorse for some owners, but then you've got this whole other level, which is, oh, and I don't like reporting to this board either. So like, I'm not just remorseful, I'm kind of resentful that I've lost my agency and kind of um, authoring my own story. Do you ever advise private equity groups like ours on how to be a better partner for founders and what the psychology of all that is,
A
Denise?
lot. A lot. Whether it's
Okay, well,
before.
please do share us a few secret nuggets if you don't mind. I need all the help I can get.
Yeah, I'll even give you an example. This is a little quarter turn off from the question you asked me, but we'll see how that ties back in. A private equity firm wanted to acquire a family-run business. The husband was ready to sell, the wife was not. She wanted the business to go to their son. And so the PE firm said, "Will you have a conversation with them? See what's happening." So when I met with them, I said, is your son in the business? Like, has he expressed a desire to take this over? He's a sophomore in college. I was like, oh, well, friends, we're a ways from that. And you could tell on the husband's face, he's just dumb shit. There's no way. Like, he's not going to take over this business. But mom was fully enmeshed on this vision, right? So I said, well, how about if I have a call? I have a visit with him and see what his plans are. So when I meet with the son, he said, if I have to get 3 PhDs to stay out of that business till they sell it, that's my plan. I'm like, well,
That's
that's
hilarious.
a plan. Maybe a better plan would be that I do a facilitated family conversation where you get to communicate that to your folks and they can get on with their lives. So that's what we did. And the mom actually went into quite a grief spiral because for her, it felt like an abandonment. It felt like that child was rejecting everything they had sacrificed for him. Mind you, he didn't ask for that. That was theirs. But once we got through that grieving process, they actually prepared and sold to that private equity firm relatively quickly because then they knew what their exit was. I think where that ties into the question, like, how do we work with founders? How do we see where are they instead of simply pursuing? Or once they are in your portfolio, like, they're unique human beings for sure. And should they be driving the car or do they want you to pull them? And so that is a piece, but also coming back to, resentment is actually unarticulated expectations. Whenever we feel resentment, if we track it back, it is because we had an expectation that we either did not articulate or did not actually secure agreement on. Whether the other person half-heartedly said yes or felt like they couldn't say no. So I actually think resentments are a good refocusing tool on what didn't I ask that I coulda, shoulda, woulda asked, and what was I afraid of that made me not ask that? Or where did I say yes to something because I felt powerless? And so that's a little bit of a balancing tool that we sometimes use.
I love that. One of the things that we're prototyping right now, Denise, is a dinner probably, but early after close to almost share with each other, me to founder, CEO, CEO, founder to me, for example. What is the legacy in the story that you want told about the next 5 years that's going to be most meaningful to you? Like, what matters and what's your personal vision that is tied to the organizational goals, and how would you like me, private equity guy, to help you fulfill your legacy? And then same for me. So we'd turn it around and I would have an opportunity to say, if you're the founder, Denise, hey, I'm Ryan and we're partners now, and in 5 years or whatever, this is what I hope you say about me,
Yeah,
and this is what I hope to achieve. Again, I like your method. 15 things, and it can't be money.
right.
Like, what is that? And we thought that might be a good place, a better place to start a conversation around this stuff that would make the 5 years more fulfilling for both sides. So I'll let you know how it goes. But I did notice in your book that you have this thing called a legacy dinner.
I do.
And I was struck by that because I think that was the running title for this activity that we're trying to figure out how to facilitate. Tell us about the legacy dinner. And first of all, tell me what a legacy is in your mind. And then what is the objective of a legacy dinner and why do you find this particularly helpful? And maybe give an example.
I think so often people think legacy is the money that I leave or my name on a building. I actually think we are always making our legacy in every interaction. I'll give you a small piece of a legacy that came forward to me. When it was time for me to go to college, neither of my parents had graduated from high school. So they were not thinking about college. That was not on their radar screen for me, but it was definitely on mine. I wanted out of this small town and off into the world. So when I got accepted to college and I went to my parents and said I wanted to go, they were like, "You want to go to college?" I remember thinking, did we never have dinner together? Like, is this
Well, you should have hooked them up with your guidance counselor.
right? Is this a first time? And so they had no money saved. And, I don't believe that parents are required to pay for college for their children, but they did not have any. So I had saved money from my part-time job. I had a scholarship and I was $2,500 short. So because I was young and I didn't know any better, I went to the banker. And that was back when the banker lived in the same community, just in a better house. Right? And so I went to the banker and asked for a loan. He sent me home with student loan papers and my dad wouldn't sign them. He said, well, what if you don't pay it? Then I'm on the hook and I don't want to take that risk. Again, a little bit of like, hey, have we not met before? Does this really seem like a big risk to you for $2,500? But again, I didn't know any better. So I went back to the banker, whose name was Mr. Finn, because adults only their first names were Mr. or Mrs. And I said, my dad won't sign the papers. And what can we do? And he made an unsecured $2,500 student loan to me. I was 16 years old. Obviously, it was probably not bank policy, but I was too young to know that. And years later, when it occurred to me, oh, wait, he stuck his neck out for me. Maybe he personally guaranteed. I don't know. I went back to ask him that question. Why did you do this for me? And he had already died. And in so many ways, I look at the legacy mark that this man made in my life, and I'm happy to tell that story. And I'm also always on the lookout for where am I positioned to be someone's Mr. Finn in a very different way. But where am I placed to be able to have that mark that I may never know about? And how do I conduct myself in my business, in my day, in my just general interactions? Because I believe we are making our legacy mark all the time. I don't think Mr. Finn thought, here, this is going to be my legacy, that I get this girl alone to get out of this little town. And I don't know that he ever even followed along with what was happening for me.
That story makes me tear up. That's really cool.
And I think it's a mistake that we think legacy is simply the money we leave for our children. That is, but it is also what do we instill in them? So the legacy dinner is a 2.5-hour facilitated dinner conversation that I host. And it's designed for 12 to 14 guests to really dial into the concept of legacy as something much more than just our money. So each guest is given a special invitation. We'll think private dining, right? I always say, the thing the wealth managers do where they say, come to Morton's and have a steak dinner on us. And but this is not that. The only thing like it is that we might eat steak and we're in private dining. This is the antithesis to that. They receive a special invitation that says, join us for a legacy dinner. It's a 2.5-hour facilitated conversation where we will talk deeper about legacy and come prepared to answer one question, which is, if I could take on the life of any other person, living, deceased, or imaginary, who would it be and why? And I will tell you, Ryan, when people get that dinner invitation, right away they're like, oh, this is not like the other things I've been invited to. And they typically start talking to other people about it before they even come. They're like, hey, I have to go to this dinner on Thursday night and I have to answer this question. Who should I be? Who would you be? And they begin talking about it. And so at the dinner, when we're all gathered, we do not talk about work because work is this much of our legacy. It's a teeny fraction of it. And we go around the table and each person shares. Now, in June in New York, I hosted my 300th legacy dinner. And each one is so different. But I will tell you about one in particular where a man said, I would like to be Wile E. Coyote. And I'm like, say why? And he said, 3 reasons. 1, Wile E. Coyote is single focused. He knows exactly what he's after, and he has never pulled off course. Number 2, Wile E. Coyote had unlimited resources. He could go to the Acme store and get anything he ever needed to get the job done. And number 3, he is immortal. Think about what you know about that person and how they are wired without knowing anything else. The woman sitting next to him at this dinner said, I would like to be Helen Keller. I was like, wow, tell us why. And she herself is legally blind. 3 people at that dinner had worked with her off and on over the years. This was a referral partner dinner, and they did not know she was legally blind. And then she said, I've always wondered, how did Helen Keller's parents decide to keep her home? Why did they not send her to an institution, which is probably what happened to children at that time? And how did they find Annie Sullivan to change her life? And then it comes out that she has a severely autistic grandchild, and her daughter and son-in-law and she are trying to figure out how to be for that child like Helen Keller's parents were for her. And as we move around the table, right, this is just the opening question to what becomes a very deep, connected conversation, so that the people who are in the room, when they leave, we know each other in a vastly different way. It is about dropping off of news, sports, and weather and coming into connection in a way that actually does change our lives. And while I could share with you lots of the other questions, I don't want to do it. I will do that with you privately because I don't want to spoil it.
Well, I would like to be invited to one if you would indulge me. Maybe we host one in Denver. That would be really
Would
fun.
love to. And it's that opportunity to say there is legacy, which is what are we accomplishing with this company? And then there is 5 years from now, who are you? And how have I helped contribute to the who you are in this company and in the world? And I think if we leave that other part out, we're missing a big chunk of who you will be from having interacted with that founder for 5 years, or that CEO, or whoever is in that place.
That is awesome. Denise, thanks for this great conversation. And I guess the best compliment that I could give you is, at least for me, you were a Mr. Finn for me today. And
thank you.
I know that our listeners will appreciate that story in particular and share with me a sense of gratitude for the courage that it took to start this practice in the first place, the content that you've provided all of us through your podcasts and other writings. That is a legacy that is really valuable. And I wish you more opportunities to spread that goodness to others. And again, for those of you listening, you can find Denise's book, The Seller's Journey. It's widely available on the web and on her website. Denise Logan, thank you for you and thank you for the work that you do and the lives that you have touched, including my own today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for asking me to join you.
Take care.